How's it going, everybody? TJ Schwartz here with Lucas Burnley. It's the Edge and Flow podcast. Welcome back. How you doing, Lucas?
Dude, I'm fired up today.
You're fired up?
Yeah.
Why?
Fired up. Well, I just finished a hyper focus loop yesterday, which was me buying a new truck.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the culmination of the last 2 months of obsessive research. And I just drove my new truck home.
That's awesome. Came straight here and got on the podcast. That's right, how much you guys matter to us.
Kind of like Christmas. It's like hard to do anything else because I just want to stand outside and mess with my truck now.
Yeah, right.
Dude,
go start doing all the little early mods that everyone does to that truck.
I can't wait, dude. So fun, dude. Buying a truck right now, like cars in general, is wild. I feel super fortunate. I tried to buy a used vehicle, which is an interesting. I don't know if you grew up this way too. I grew up with fully taught that buying a new car was for suckers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same.
Yeah, and man, at this point, when I look at the value, I think it depends on how you use cars. I don't trade them out very often or anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But dude, it was I bought a Ford F-150 in this time because I've got my Tacoma and I love it, but those feet are up against my back seat and we're maxed out. The other one, I want to throw this out there, which is these minor hacks that you kind of miss, but we're self-employed, right? If you buy a vehicle over 6,000 pounds gross vehicle weight, you can write off your percentage of use. So my vehicle usage is 50%.
Mm-hmm.
You can section 179 it, take that deduction inside of 1 year.
Yep. I was not able to do that, but I strongly considered buying a vehicle to do that with.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a definite reason to go buy a 6,000 pound rated vehicle.
I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah. It's an awesome little thing. Cause it's the section 179 is exactly what you use to buy a CNC machine too.
Yeah.
So it's it falls in the same category.
And I think this is just so systemic or systematic, not systemic, systematic, upgrades and improvements as it relates to business and life. I think there's a lot of parallels there, but I realized as I was looking at all of these different vehicles, going for trading out of my truck, which I love, to go for something that's more capable, but older, but lacks features. I was it doesn't feel like an upgrade. Mm-hmm. It feels like the wrong direction.
Well, I'm happy for you, man. That is a fantastic buy. I really like those trucks. So
got it at Invoice too.
What's that?
Got it for Invoice.
Dude, that's awesome.
Which is crazy. That's what I mean. Right now, cars and trucks are so wild because depending on where you buy them can have a wildly different price point. It's
there was the big car boom of 2021 and 2022, and now it's a chaotic aftermath maybe of that. Is that what it feels like?
It's wild. So I went through Kendall Ford here in Bend, and Kendall gets a lot of the inventory apparently because they're a big dealership. And so the truck that I found other places is much more expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And the build that I found is hard to find other places. So it's it's that right, they happen to have the truck on the lot. It's weird to find something where it had every feature I wanted and nothing I didn't.
Yeah.
That's wild.
So I know exactly what you mean. My wife's car, when we found it was in Bozeman, Montana, I'm in Idaho, which is close to Montana, but I'm on the other side of Idaho. Yeah. So I flew to it to get it. They picked me up. The dealership guys picked me up. I went, got it, drove it all the way back.
Yeah.
But yeah, if I'm the same way as you, I'll research it to exhaustion and I'll get it to where it's it's 9 out of 10 of the options that are available. I'm non-negotiable on those options. There's only 1 or 2 that I could go either way on.
Yep.
And then I have to hunt. Yeah.
Dude. And there's so many options. And I was basically the plan is we're doing a small slide-in camper, a 4-wheel camper.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm looking at weight ratings and all this stuff. And people are telling me I need to go 3/4 ton. So I'm test driving and looking at years. It's an insane amount of information.
Yeah, it is.
It's too much.
And very religiously opinionated too.
Super.
Information.
Yeah. And looking, I was going between Ford and Ram and then between gas and diesel. So it's I literally was in a perfect vortex of every argument that has ever existed.
Yeah.
Like,
It's like Green Bay Packers versus Vikings. It's like you're not going to
so
find reliable
there's
data on that. You know what I mean?
man.
Like,
Oh, it's so good.
yeah.
Oh
Well,
man.
that's
All
good,
right.
man.
So that's that.
Congrats. So yeah, just that's for context. You literally told me you were coming home from the dealership to come record with me.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
that's where
I
we're
think, I
at.
mean, it's like kind of business related. I don't know.
Yeah. It's a
So,
Section 179. So yeah, it's business related. 50%.
that's so good.
I like it.
Now I just got to sell the taco.
Yeah.
And then
That'll
we'll
be easy.
Be easy. All
Yeah.
right. What do you got going on?
Well, second week with Dalton in the shop is closing out today, and
Nice.
it is going really, really, really good. He's sharp. He's doing a great job. He's running the Sile right now, so he's actually running the Overland right now, like the actual tang of the blade.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got him trained up. He came from a machinist background, but all manual machinist.
Mm-hmm.
And I was curious to see how that would work in the CNC environment, but it's incredible. Like his ability to see like tool wear and finishes. I've learned just in the 2 weeks he's been here that like his hands-on machinist knowledge is possibly of more value to me than if he had run CNC. Because
Dude.
I'm the one doing the programming and setup, which is the stuff he doesn't know how to do, but he does know how to look at the parts and say there's a burr.
There's the number one thing right there. You
Yeah.
need to know how to see.
Yeah.
I was going to say, like, I feel like that flow of manual machinist to CNC is more valuable than the other way around. And I'm sure someone will argue with me, and I'm sure there's like, special cases to that. But at the end of the day, like, precision is precision. If you're like looking and understanding like what a part is supposed to be, know what it feels like, dude, that's best case scenario.
Yeah. It's going really well. So I'm finally, it was about 2 weeks of just training, just trying to get him up to speed on a lot of things. And then that it all went super well, but it's like a heavy load of 2 weeks of it. Basically, I would say for 2 weeks, he was doing what I would do by proxy.
Yeah.
And I was just kind of helping and overseeing and like training, but try not to stay in his way. And so I wasn't very productive for 2 weeks because it's like, he's doing what I'm kind of explaining.
Yeah.
And so this today and yesterday a little bit, and this next week coming, he's going to be on a task where I've had him trained up. And I'm going to kick into design mode. And this is time to see like how effective it is to have an employee, because 5 days to focus on design and not have the anxiety of my machines just idle, I think is going to be awesome. So next week on the pod, I think it's going to be fun to talk about that, about how that's gone.
Oh, I want to dig into this a little bit right now, because you're saying that next week you're going to have 5 theoretical days of design. This is after a 2-week onboarding process. Okay. I think that anybody that's listening that has like any experience around manufacturing, especially at small scale, like multiple task manufacturing, being able to bring in an employee and have them semi-autonomous within 2 weeks. So I think you mentioned earlier, did you say he has experienced every step of the process? Like he's done it himself?
He has done every single step of a knife that comes out of my shop that could be done in my shop within the first 2 weeks.
So
except for sharpening, I take that back. Sharpening.
Okay.
I'm
sharpening. Yeah. And that's going to be a thing.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say like, this is an incredible testament to like the process is the product.
Well, I appreciate that,
dude. I mean, seriously, like you somehow have come up with a process that you can enter in a new human and within 2 weeks have him functioning. That's crazy.
Well, I appreciate that. And I am happy that it's been working like that.
Dude.
And that I will say, I never even knew for sure if I would hire, but I tried to look at everything that I was doing as treating myself like I'm an employee.
Yeah. Smart.
Like if I'm half asleep, can I still figure this out? Like, is there enough guardrails and enough things set up and like laminated sheets to guide me, and like programs that are set up fully and all this? So in treating me like an employee, it's kind of like he's doing the same thing I was. So I appreciate that. And it's also a testament, though, I would say, to how sharp he is, because he's super sharp. He's impressive.
Right person with like right background. But regardless, man, 2 weeks inside of what you're doing, I mean, that's fast by any standard.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, you've got you've got some autonomy.
Yeah, it feels good, and I'll be in and out of the shop. There's a few things like he's not just going to shoulder the whole load,
Yeah.
but I wanted him to know how to do things so that I could, when a pinch came where I needed to do something else, like go to a trade show or something,
Yeah.
I could delegate most things in the shop to him, almost anything, and trust it. But a lot of the time, I will be out there too doing different parts, so
For
it's
sure.
going to be a little bit of a dance. But it just so happens that like him coming in, I'm not behind in that I'm beyond what I quoted for wait time on my orders, but it feels like I'm behind because I don't like my lead time being super long,
Mm-hmm.
and so we're digging out of a hole. Like step one is just
Mm-hmm.
start like produce more knives than orders coming in for a while to get that like stack thinner, you know? And so I just wanted him to be on all these tasks, and like all these knives need fully made, all the parts, you know what I mean? Like there's some of them that are in the very, very beginning stages. And so I just needed him ready to roll. And luckily it's working.
So
So
happy for you.
thank you.
It's
Feels
exciting.
good.
That's real. I mean, that is like real paradigm shifting movement. The
And,
reality of that, to be able to pull yourself to the point where you can do design work. I mean, that is huge. I've struggled with that forever because it's always that balance of like,
mm-hmm,
do I do the work for now that pays now, or do I do work for the future?
right.
And right now, with one hire, you're getting to a point where you're able to attend in some level to both effectively.
Right. Yeah.
That's like
That's the hope.
game
And
changer.
so like I said, it's been 2 weeks of me just working with him, and the next week is when like the new era will kick in, and I'm excited for that. So
Nice.
I'll be, like I said, I'm designing the next. I already have the mental image of what I want, but I'm actually doing the engineering and design for the next fixed blade that I'm going to be making.
Nice.
Which brings me, I want to have a conversation about the Nova One. It's it. It's a good conversation. It's just maybe we have a change in direction in order.
Ooh,
And
okay.
here's the thing. So I'm doing all bevels in house
Yep.
moving forward. I've decided that like unequivocally, and
Yep.
I'm just Tactile ground a batch of knives for me, and they did a great job. And
Yep.
I actually, I mean, these are good knives, and I'm shipping them, but it worked up a lot of kinks in the system that weren't there before because
Right.
of how big those batches were sized and the size of my shop, and like either being 1 or 2 man shop. It's just the batches to make that work were not gonna work. And so now I'm smaller batches but more often, and that's
Yep.
the way I was operating before.
Keeping the flexibility,
Yeah,
ideally.
but where I've landed is that does mean that I'm milling bevels and
Yep.
stoning them, and I
Yep.
have new stoning technology that I'm using that's increasing that output greatly,
Yep.
which also happened in the last 2 weeks. But I'm concerned about diving into a large Tonto blade
I get it.
with my process. I think I can see it absolutely working, but I can see it being a very frustrating thing to scale.
I would agree. I think that specifically process, and this is a great point. Full transparency for fun too. Like TJ, before we got on, DJ was like, "Hey, I want to talk about the Nova," and I was like, "Hold it, just
Mhm.
like hold it, and let's go over it. Like even
Yeah,
if it's awkward."
do it
So
live.
this is
Yeah,
like less awkward than I thought it could be, which is
yeah,
awesome, but fun. The Nova One at the point was part of the reason we went with that was because of the process you were looking at
yeah, yeah.
with Tactile doing your bevel
Yep,
grinding.
yep.
So that I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, the process is the product. Being a driver for this, the
Yeah.
process just changed. So the
Process changed.
product needs to change.
So now we adapt.
And so that's so where I'm at is if you're interested, I still absolutely want to design from you. And
Okay.
I would love to have for what I'm looking at, that one of the slots in my catalog that I see moving forward is a smaller skeletonized lightweight. So it's something that you could approach or I could approach, but it's on the table.
Okay.
Or I mean, beyond that, like something a little bit more mid-size and tactical would be cool.
Okay.
Rather than going like full-size tactical, like the Strafe is something that you designed one time that I really liked,
Mm-hmm.
and it's something a little bit more approachable from the bevel standpoint to not totally
Totally
blow up on the
approachable.
machine time.
Yeah.
If that
It's
makes
good,
sense.
like good size. I think key for you also, or like for the brand,
Hmm.
is like multiple use, right? Like all knives are kind of like you can use them for different things, but there are things that hit certain like I guess like benefits or like techniques better than others, right? Like I, at the end of the day, like maybe not doing Itano fits like the overall kind of course of the brand too. I think that I think with working with an outside designer, having some type of aesthetic change like from what you were doing, so it doesn't just like plug straight in and like just look like another model in the line. I think it's fun to actually create, it's like almost a little bit of tension where you're like, this looks different, the lines are different, like shapes are different.
I agree.
Okay.
And I do like the tactical spin. I do still think that's an interesting direction. I think just if you can imagine bevel being a little bit small, like I said, the strafe, I always love that design. That design's already run its course and done the things you're doing with it. I'm not, looking to get that design, but that's kind of like from a process standpoint, what I'm picturing. That, or like I said, like a skeletonized lightweight is an empty void that I either you help me with or I'll approach myself, but that's something that I will do.
I got some ideas.
So we're back to the drawing board on the Nova One.
Yeah.
And again, sorry about that. I know you put work into that knife.
Oh, good. That's why we did a really good job though, right? Which was we didn't take the stages of work too far. And like at the end of the day, like if it had been fully designed, fully finished, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. This is par for the course in design, right? Like working with a company if you're dealing with a company that's having sales meetings and they're looking at designs, they can like something and then 3 months later decide it's not a good fit.
Yeah.
So like you have to be like, and I say you, like obviously like both of us and anyone doing this type of work, like you have to be able to kind of like adapt and then figure out like, okay, so like where is the opportunity here? Like, okay, it's not this design. What is a better fit? Like what is the opportunity that this is presenting?
And I do think that original design that you had there, I mean, you're free to do whatever you want with it, but I would reapproach that. I think if I had in my next shop, there's things I want to do that would allow me to scale up in the size of the bevel. That I just don't have that in my like repertoire right now. I just don't have it. So
well, there's some fun thoughts there too. Like ultimately I kind of feel like like my rule with design is like ideal scenario is everything is a series. So everything can be a series expanded upon, right? What does expansion look like? That can vary, but it can be sizes, it can be blade shapes, it can be construction. So there's a lot there, right? So I think reapproaching this, like the Nova One, there's definitely some areas where it could be expanded on, but it's a fairly specific design.
It's got a big knife vibe.
It's got big knife vibes, and it's got some ergonomic features that like don't necessarily scale.
When I look at it, I think expansion for that is bigger. It's
Same.
like there's that, and then the next one,
and then there's like a
one.
10-inch bladed version, right?
Rather
so it's expansion, but that's such a niche of it's literal expansion. Makes me want to like see if I could do a small one now too. But that is it. Like the lines there are specific. So you're dealing with some I don't know, some like design language that's not as flexible. So maybe that's what I'll do. Maybe I'll look at this and be like, all right, like we're reapproaching it. Like what is there that if the model does well, we have somewhere to take that model should we choose to. And what fits now in your current workflow. And this is, I mean, again, you're moving so fast and trying so many things that the fact that you've even like come around back to being like, oh, that process didn't work. I like want to keep the flexibility and like the ability to do this completely in-house. I think is like, that's a pretty quick lesson. Big scheme.
Yeah.
It wasn't an expensive, like it wasn't a very expensive lesson, which is cool.
No, I'm happy with how that all went.
Yeah.
It just, I think like I said, it's, few hundred knives a piece, per shot to go have them bevel ground. And what I ran into is like, that kind of means I can't even finish one unless I do 200 or 300.
Yep.
And I'm like, that, it wasn't until I was in the midst of it that I was like, that actually doesn't feel very good. You know what I mean?
It's these are the scale problems, right?
Yeah.
Like scaling for the sake of scaling, not probably the best idea. And like when you scale one thing, you scale everything related to that.
Yeah. Yeah. So the beauty of the way I'm doing it is I can do, 10, 25, 40, 50 knives, whatever I want really,
Right.
And make sure that everything is on track and everything's going to work all the way through, like the prototype and initial like ramp up is smoother and less scary, I would say. There's just less to be lost if something goes wrong on such a like scaling a new thing so fast.
Totally. And just not being tied. And that's the thing, like numbers are a hard one from like the thing you are tied to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. You're fully tied to it. Here's like a little tangent we can go on. Okay. The method in which you are making your knives, like it's kind of like this micro manufacturing thing where all processes for the most part, like can kind of be done in-house. Like you're still outsourcing some things, but it's like small scale. Okay. The send to bevel grinding, larger numbers. Do you think that I'm trying to figure out how to like word this? Do you think that is it from a different time period? And are we as an industry moving back towards like this smaller scale, like it's like small scale, like it's like sole authorship manufacturing very close to. Okay. So a company that I would like consider in that, we talk about them a lot, is like Chris Reeves.
Yeah.
Where I feel like the way that they produce their knives was not like the standard manufacturing method for knives of a production level at the time that they started doing it.
Yeah. I mean, he invented the titanium frame lock. So
yeah,
he had to have all new processes.
All new processes.
Yeah.
I just mean like from a production company though.
Yeah.
Like you go there's different
Workflow.
things. It's like workflow. There's a bunch of machines that big production companies have that they don't have. They're doing it in a different way. They're doing like a unique version. I think there are like methods or I guess not like, maybe it's just like schools of thought where you're like, okay, like you have the big knife companies, they make knives this way. And then you have smaller knife companies that like came online and in the 2000s, probably like as I'm guessing. And they did things like just slightly different.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's also evident in the product because again, if the process is different, the product's going to be different. And so like a lot of people will take the same process that other people are doing and say, I want to make a unique knife using the same process.
This process. Yeah.
Well, it's hard to make it unique. Even if the design's unique, like it doesn't look that unique.
Why is that, TJ? Why? Say it. Say it.
The process is the product, my friend. Yeah.
But it's true, right?
Even if you made the knife that's the same, like if I made a knife that was the same design as something that was made by a large manufacturer, the knife would look very different because of the process. Even if I was almost making the exact same thing, just because the finishing would be different, the bevel would look different.
Right.
The sheath would look, it would just, the process would change the outcome.
So here, this is crazy though, as a tie-in, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's obvious. Knife makers, individual knife makers that learn from other knife makers, a lot of times their work is very similar.
Yeah.
And I have always thought it's not from a design standpoint, it's because of the methods that they learned to make.
The process.
The process is the product.
Yeah.
I would like someone to make us an auto tune.
I know.
Turn that into a loop for us.
I try not to say too much because I feel like it's getting annoying, but it's like I can't escape it. It's just this like whirlpool that keeps sucking me into it. This whole process is the product
I feel like there's like it's like a cardinal truth. And it's also relevant. It's like relevant right now. It really is. Like for you, for me, the thought process is like it keeps being proven to us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Keeps coming up. Like if there's a point where it's not coming up, you won't say it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But exactly. I don't know. It's been interesting watching the forms of manufacturing and the forms of making at this point over the last 2 decades where you start to see these trends. So we see trend to, early
Mhm.
mid 2000s. Okay.
Mhm.
Lots of gray knives, lots of knives that are being produced by other shops. And it's like, what is mid tech then? It's like, the frames and blades might be machined and like finished by someone else. They bring them into a shop and like maybe blast, anodize, and assemble or something like that. You see the rise of the overseas OEM. That's like a very interesting, like
Mhm.
that basically, like in my opinion, kind of was the coffin nail for like what we consider mid tech,
Mhm.
because the knives were so good and so efficiently made, right? They
Mhm.
felt different. Like all of a sudden you're like, oh, you have this like gray knife, or you have this like beautiful custom. This just
Mm.
doesn't happen to be custom.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
in there, you have like all of the big companies being big companies, but you have the smaller makers, right? Essentially trying these different components. You like try small scale manufacturing ourselves to increase, output, have a run of OEM knives done. And then you have kind of there's a few of the smaller, like US, like kind of what you would consider like mid-tech manufacturers, like branching out into their own brands.
Mhm.
Right. So like that would be like the millets,
Yep.
that kind of level. And that's where, I mean, like this process kind of exists. Cause like Millet was doing a lot with a little, right? I feel like in the beginning, Chris Reeve did a lot with a little. It's like
Mhm.
figuring out how to make your tools
Yeah.
do what $1 million tool is going to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
It almost feels like a democratization of manufacturing. It's like a
Totally.
spreading out. It's
Yeah.
like a wider net as
Yeah.
far as instead of like a handful of OEMs making it for all the companies,
Yeah.
it's like the companies start making it themselves or small startups
Yeah.
in like all these different ways. And like I said, I think it results in a field of products that have
Yeah.
more uniqueness
Yeah.
across the board. I like it.
Yeah.
I like the trend
I
for
do
sure.
too. I really, where I see a lot of this going, like right now, is, I mean, there's a glut of knives on the market. I think in like the OEM side.
Hmm.
And like I've done 2 runs of the SQDs. We have those produced for us by Fox in Italy. And like I watch the knives that are coming out. I watch price points, and like there's a lot of very, very good knives on the market,
Hmm.
right? I truly think there's this sweet spot around the small scale manufacturing, because what I've seen around our brand is that like custom output at this point, compared to the visibility most of us are actually able to achieve, is a very bad fit.
Hmm.
You spend 90% of your time not actually being able to capitalize on the audience that you've built.
Right.
Whereas you are in like this sweet spot of, you have a little bit more of an efficient output, or a lot of it, but the product is still like super authentic, super like custom feeling. It took me a long time. Like I always considered Chris Reeve custom, like before I knew about them really.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
still do, because it's like the end product is what feels custom to me. So it's
Yeah.
like my brain organizes it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah,
I
it's
don't
like
know.
you're looking at custom on the spectrum of, in a sense, quality
Yeah.
almost,
Yeah.
quality and finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and you've got like HMC Machine Works, same thing. Like one dude in his shop, couple CNCs,
Hmm.
doing custom work, but doing more output than like what my generation of custom makers,
Yeah.
for the most part, was really doing.
Yeah. Well, and it's like I feel like this trend is wider than the knife industry because you
Totally.
look at like beer, like
Yep.
microbreweries. It went from, I don't know, 20 years ago where it was like you had the Coors, the Busch, the
Yep.
Bud Light, you had Budweiser, all this stuff, and then it was like all of a sudden the democratization, the spreading out of this idea of like we're going to make beer, and you've got the microbreweries, the little restaurants popping up, doing it different, making all of a sudden mango sour or something or other,
Totally.
just way more unique. Um,
But then in there's an industry that pops up where there's more supplies. Cause
yep.
like anytime, like I feel like anytime you're on like the leading edge, regardless of like overall availability, it's like leading edge of technology inside of a specific industry when it's new to your industry.
Hmm.
The front runners are guys who are like, it's like hobbyists that are like Grimsmo is a great example, like just build a CNC.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different time. He had different resources at that time. He had like a time resource, but not a financial resource, right? You're like learning in a different way, or like, you know, guys that are, yeah, I guess building CNCs is like such a great example. Cause I know when I was in my 20s, I was friends with like guys that were in college that were like, you know, building like, I don't know, they were in an engineering program and they were like building a solar car. But then in their off hours, they were trying to figure out how to build a CNC because they
Yeah.
saw like the potential of it.
Yeah.
Whereas now you have a brand like Tormach or Sile.
Yeah.
And it's like Sile is a great example because you're like, yeah, it's like high level machine at like a very affordable price.
Yeah.
Lasers, same thing.
Yep.
3D printing. So, dude, like, I don't know why I'm obsessed with this. Omax makes a small form factor water jet.
That looks awesome.
Dude, they're $30,000. It's not nothing, but it's Omax. And I look at it and it's not that I look at it and go, oh, that's going to be the most efficient way to do water jet. It's that I could have the power and process of water jet and the learning and understanding that comes with it
Mm-hmm.
inside of a 3 foot by 3 foot space that fits in my 1,500 square foot shop.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not people are like, oh yeah, that's like a toy. You don't need that thing. And I'm like, no, I need all the toys.
Yeah. Right.
That's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah. No, that I've thought about that quite a bit because I have water jet done here in town, and with that small form factor like that, it definitely starts to become justifiable at some point with a bigger shop and whatnot. But
it's like being able to heat treat, right?
Yeah.
It's not that you need to heat treat everything you ever do, but the ability to heat treat in your shop, I think, is as a knife maker is like one of the most valuable because, dude, something gets lost in the mail. Like I have like a strong, like, I think like a survivor bias. I'm like waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, something's going to go wrong. And I look, I'm like, if I can produce one knife, I can in my shop, if I can produce enough to pay my mortgage and pay my bills, like my family will be okay.
Yeah. Like build a fortress.
You build a fortress.
Cause like for me right now, I've got an operation that's running smoothly, but without the ability to heat treat, if something were to happen on that front, I can't make a knife.
You can't make a knife.
Yeah.
And also a lot of this is around interest. You doing heat treating in your shop makes you think about heat treating in a different way.
Yeah.
Or it might be, hey, we want to run some Chad Nichols Damascus Overlands, and I'm going to run 5 of them. And it's a different steel heat treat cycle than what we're sending out. We'll just do it in-house. Like, it's that same thing of like running your bevels in-house gives you flexibility. That doesn't mean it's overall the most effective method. It means it's the right method for the scale that you want to accomplish.
Right. Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, I'd love to get heat treat in-house. Water jet is a little lower on the list than heat treat. Heat treat's pretty high, but if you buy that water jet, please buy it because I want to hear about it.
It's funny. I look at it and I'm like, okay, right now it's too much. And I'm really trying to like dig into like my, this whole like why I get in these loops and like obsessive about learning a process. That's what I did with forging. Right. But it's the same example. 10 years ago, you're basically like, oh, you want a power hammer? All right. You're going to go find like either a little giant that someone has restored or some other small hammer, or you're going to find one that's clapped out and you're going to learn how to rebuild it. And you're going to like spend, and now it's like, oh, you can spend 10 grand and you can get an Anyang that's beautiful and will last easily my working lifetime and my kids' working lifetime. That's different.
Yeah.
My forging area is in a 10 by 10 square. And inside of that, I have a 25-ton press with a digital controller. Didn't exist. From a small American company, that is building them. I've got, gas forge. I've got, I'm like, this is crazy. Like those resources are available because of like where we are at in
Yeah,
manufacturing.
small scale or
Yeah.
medium scale in-house manufacturing. I have a soft spot for that, and
Right.
I see it growing everywhere, and I think it's awesome.
It's like big enough to be effective, but not
Small
but
enough to be
also
unique.
realize, yeah, also like realizing our scale and realizing that like a lot of times we don't need the full industrial uh like level,
That's right. Yeah,
right?
and especially if it's niche, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it's niche enough that the big boys just aren't going to be able to justify serving that niche, you know what I
Yep.
mean? That's like Tormach, you know what I mean? They kind of paved the way for its, Haas is making their smallest machines still, most of them require three phase and they're still
Yeah.
pretty big and heavy.
And
And like,
expensive. I
yeah,
mean,
and expensive.
they're real dollars.
And Tormach's like, let's come out and start kind of on, on the, we're going to put this in a garage. We're going to plug it into 110 electricity.
Yep.
And then Tormach kind of moved up from there towards like a little bit closer to the industrial, but still below it. And yeah, that's just a cool new world, a new thing to explore. Like in every industry, I just see it happening everywhere. It seems
Yeah.
like.
Well, I mean, also related to like our earlier truck conversation, which is like a lot of times like you buy used tools. You buy
Mhm,
machine tools, you're like, you're not going to go buy the newest thing. Like at least I didn't,
mhm,
right? So when I bought my Haas, like I bought pre-owned, I had it inspected. The reality is if you're doing the work, like a lot of times like loan payments and like financing is like very approachable. I'm actually of the mind now that a lot of times you are better off buying new equipment because it is
mhm.
eliminating a huge margin of
Liability.
potential
Yeah.
liability.
For me, I'm pretty unlikely to buy if it's like a linchpin piece of equipment, like a
Yeah.
keystone piece of equipment. I'm pretty
Yeah.
unlikely to buy used. The
Yeah.
Tormach I bought used, but it was only like 6 months used,
Yeah. It's like a deal.
and
That's a different deal.
yeah, but yeah, like it's not that I'm against used because I buy used in pretty much every other aspect of life, but if my, well-being kind of relies on this thing, like I've got to reduce variables as much as possible.
Yeah.
And especially in the last few years, like the way a lot of these machine tools have held their value, it's again similar to the trucks and stuff. It's kind of hard to justify buying used when the price is almost the same as new,
Right.
So
Well, it's that like fuck around and find out thing.
yeah. Yeah.
Like, and I love the chart, right? Like how much you fuck around is
Yep.
directly tied to how much you
Yeah.
find out. And
Yeah.
like with certain things, like I look at like, okay, getting out of the truck, I'm like, I want as many safety features and like as much capability because it's like I'm going to take my family in it.
Hmm. Hmm.
That is not an area that actually makes sense for me to like skimp on.
Hmm.
It's the same with machine tools. It's like, man, if you do this and it's a lemon, what does that cost you? Like, is the potential? And like, obviously, different people have different skill sets. Some people love working on stuff. Some people have a skill set that like maybe they can like handle that level of work. For me, a lot
Hmm.
of times I realize now I want to do the work. Like I
Yeah.
want to do the work that I'm skilled at. I don't want to problem solve to get to the point where I can
Yeah.
do my work.
And another thing is the redundancy thing. So in my next
Totally.
shop, I want to have two. So I've got two spindles right now, but the Tormach genuinely, like, I probably wouldn't want it to do what the Sile's doing right now. Like the
Yeah.
Sile's is doing better work, and I don't
Yeah.
think I would step backwards. But I think something, either another Sile or something similar, having two spindles that are equivalent to the Sile, I see that as being part of like building that fortress.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's going to require a bigger shop, but even if I don't have the work for two spindles, just eliminating the liability of just
Yeah.
having one.
Yeah.
Because I was listening to the Business of Machining podcast with John Saunders and John Grimsmo today. I think it dropped today, and John Grimsmo, he runs that Kern. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And he that's like a huge linchpin for his whole big company. You know what I mean?
Right.
The spindle went out on it. So he just announced that today on that podcast, and he's like talking to Kern, seeing about if he's going to have to fly spindle out from Germany or if they have one in the States, and the whole everything is the whole shop shut down when that machine shuts down. So he's got ideas, like he seems like cool headed, he's got solutions and whatnot, but that's a
That's
big
big.
problem.
Yeah.
Um, so that's kind of a shot over the bow when I was listening to that podcast of like the SIO right now is pretty critical. And I don't have like 13 employees like he has or whatever it is.
Right.
So it's a little less critical, but still. So
The other thing too is like just having resources on deck.
yeah.
So you either have like backup is one thing, but backup is essentially an asset that is sitting unless you're
Hmm.
actively using it.
Hmm.
Resources are the ability to buy another machine because
Yeah.
you're like, you know what? I'm not even going to wait for this to get fixed. Just send me another machine
Yeah.
if it's available. Like,
The only problem with that is time. Because if
right.
you have
It's all
13
time.
employees, the difference between 10 days and 30 days
Yeah.
is like,
Well,
that's
and
a,
the resources to buy a new kern are not like
yeah.
that does not exist. The resource to
Yeah.
have a backup kern,
Yeah.
does not
Yeah.
exist for most
Yeah.
people.
So I think if it was for me, if I have such a linchpin thing like my Sile, like if the Tormach went down, the Sile could run the things that the Tormach's running.
Sure.
It'd be annoying, but it could do it. I think if whatever that machine is that's a linchpin for me, I think I wouldn't want to buy one that's so nice that I couldn't afford redundancy.
Yeah.
Because if I bought like my dream CNC machine, but I could only afford the one,
Yeah.
then I am cornering myself. I think
That's an
staying
honest decision.
staying a little more modest on the
Yeah.
purchase so that you could theoretically have two,
Yep.
maybe is the way to go.
Well, also like looking at your work, I think pragmatically, we've talked about this a little bit, which is like when I first kind of started learning about machines, that like the prevailing thought process was like buy as big as you can afford, like blah
Hmm.
blah blah. And I'm like, I get that, but like my work envelope doesn't change, and there's actually things that are more important than the size
Hmm.
for the type of work we
That
do.
I think that's good advice for a job shop.
Exactly. Good
Yeah.
advice for a job shop. But the place that you are getting your advice is is very relevant to the advice that you're being given.
Hmm.
It's hard to know, I think, at the outset, like where to like what like how do you think critically about advice? Like what is the system to figure out if advice you are being given is applicable to your situation?
Right. Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I try to listen to all advice, but also take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah.
But like my Sile, it's a 13-inch X travel. So I could make like a 12.5-inch overall length knife. So if I ever wanted more than that, I would need more size, but I
Yep.
don't plan on that for at least as far as I can see into the future.
Yep.
So yeah, doing a
But that
one,
might inform, like, say you go to buy another, if you go to buy another style, there's the very real possibility that you'd be like, all right, I can get one with more travel that can do the same job, but now I have the opportunity to do more travel if I choose to.
hmm. Hmm.
Like that's also like a leveling up where
Hmm.
you're increasing your capacity for potential future. If
Right.
you look at it and you're like, there is a 50% chance, better than 50% chance that I will do something that is over this size envelope,
Yeah.
then it's worthwhile. If you're like, I'm not going to do anything, then you're like, that extra capacity doesn't matter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I'm super happy with that machine. I think I've said that multiple times, but the thing runs like a top, dude. And I think part of why I'm trusting my employees so much is how stable that machine
Yeah.
is. Thermally, it is so stable, dude. Like it gets running and he's running it right now. He's going to run it all week. It's like it just gets into a groove where like it has a tiny bit of thermal expansion in the Z in the morning, like the first two parts.
Mm-hmm.
Usually make one tiny adjustment to the Z, and I taught him how to do that and what to look for, and then it'll just run as long as you want to run it, and it's not moving, it's not going anywhere. And so holding tolerances on it is like a non-issue.
Should also be said that like you're in a small space, so this might actually be more critical than it would be for like a shop or like a CNC in like a big warehouse with a tall ceiling, because
Right.
your temperature changes like are legit.
Right. That, and I think I'm not sure how much of the temperature change is actually from like
Ambient.
external.
Yeah.
I think
Or if it's
most of
all internal.
I think most of it's internal.
I just always
'Cause
assumed like it's like both going up, and I could be
yeah, it's
totally wrong. I'm
probably
like, if you're in a room that's hot and like
right.
your CNC is running and it's hot, I just assume that
Right.
like an ambient temperature change of 5 degrees
I'm
starts to affect.
I'm sure it does. But I also have to imagine like a cold shop for me is like 60 degrees and a
Mhm.
hot shop is like 90, so that's only
Mhm.
30 degrees.
Sure. Maybe
But
it doesn't matter.
like the spindle turning at 8,000 RPM for a few
100%.
hours, it's probably like the spindle might be over in the internal parts of it, like over 100 degrees. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's like that is my theory as to where that's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it might not be. It's a
Right.
good point.
It's like probably good. Probably actually where it's coming from.
But I do hear like anecdotal stuff about people like opening big garage doors on a CNC shop and then all the machines go out of tolerance. So that's a real thing if it's like enough change fast enough.
Well, it's funny. So if you
Um,
take that thought and you like blow it up. So say you have a heat treat oven, and inside of that heat treat oven, like an electric heat treat oven with coils inside of it. If you open the door, it cools off faster.
mhm.
Okay. If you open the door and blow compressed air in to cool it down very fast, your coils will come out of the walls.
Because of the
They'll
thermal
rapid
expansion.
cooling,
Mm.
right? They'll just contract.
Hmm.
So, I mean, that like it happens. It's a big garage door with like heat being pulled out. Oh, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've heard that anecdotally. I don't know
Yeah.
that for a fact, but it makes sense. But I think with the Sile, because it's mineral casting frame, I'm seeing literally as almost zero thermal movement in the X and Y plane.
So cool.
I mean, essentially zero for all intents and purposes. All of the change is in the Z, and that is because even though it's all a mineral casting frame, the spindle is still steel. The whole cartridge, the fixture is aluminum. It's a Pearson, so it's like 4 or 5 inches of aluminum. Then you have the steel table, so that as it warms up, the spindle nose and the table get closer together for about 2 hours. The first when you first start running it. And that is all stuff that's getting drenched in coolant. So it's actually the coolant temperature rising, and the coolant is flushing across where you're cutting, and it's picking up like warmth. And so if you wanted to control that the most effectively, you would control the coolant, because
I was
the
just going to
coolant.
ask, is there like a coolant temperature? Like, can you keep a coolant at a consistent temperature?
So that is kind of the magic of like the Kern and some of the high end machines, is the coolant is like extremely temperature controlled, like to the 10th of a degree, and that's how they're able to manage it. And
so is it? I guess it would be heated, probably.
Yeah, I think the easiest way would be heat it to a desirable level that's warmer than it'll ever get otherwise.
It's like quenching oil. Where
yeah,
like
with the only problem being you're going to grow bacteria really fast if you're heating your coolant.
Gross.
Yeah. So I mean, but that being said, like it's such a small range that it's not actually affecting our parts. Like it's just one little thing you have to check in the morning, but it's not bad. But because the X and Y plane is not changing, that is a blessing, because if you're not watching that, because where that would yield out on my parts is the chamfers would start to get wobbly on you, like left to right. That basically is a non-issue. When I was running on the Tormach, I would consistently all day be chasing that because of thermal change. I assume thermal change. Now that we don't chase it at all, like we run it and it just stays
I'm excited to learn more or become a better machinist, because I've relied on my hand skills for so long. When I'm machining parts, like within tolerance is like, it's relative, because the parts work. Like I might have like a small change in a chamfer, and like a lot of times I'm doing so much handwork on the parts that it's not that it doesn't matter. It's that I've always just been part of the process.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So chasing precision has not been something that I've done, but now as I'm learning more, this is like the problem. Like I can't unsee it.
Right.
Incidentally, Keaton is coming by tomorrow to help me set up my Pearson.
Nice.
I'm asking for help, because that is like the perfect scenario of things that I would have a very hard time with doing.
He's an awesome guy. I barely know him, but he's got really cool stuff on his feed. Watchmaker. I mean, it's cool.
We need to get you out here so we can hang out.
Yeah, I know. I want to meet him.
And I need to come visit you. Yeah, man, that's fun. It's all good stuff. What else is going on?
As far as podcast related, I mean, I might actually do a little mini announcement, like, because the podcast followers mean a lot to me, and what I'm actually working on designing is a compact overland fixed blade.
Nice.
And I may have already said that on the podcast and I forgot. Do you know if I did? I might have. I don't know.
I know nothing.
But
I don't think so.
I'm calling it the Overland Sport.
Oh, cool.
But that's what I'm working on, and I'm curious to see the Confidant I did by myself while also trying to keep up with production.
Right.
And back to back, I'm now going to do a new design while also having an employee. And it'll be like side-by-side comparison of how effective I am product development wise and speed wise on that side.
Yep.
With the extra help. Should be fun.
Dude, that's exciting.
But that's what I'm working on. That's what I'll be on pretty much all next week. So let's circle back.
Okay.
What sounded interesting to you, skeletonized or mid-size?
Uh, Both, man. Honestly, I've got two thoughts that keep banging around in my head. So I just designed a skeletonized knife,
Yeah, and it's sweet.
and I really like it. And I've got two now, so I have two
Hmm.
versions, and that one might be a really like. I feel like that one slides into the line
Yeah.
very easily.
When I said that, I was definitely thinking about that
I thought
design.
you might
I
be.
kind of got little sticky fingers going.
I thought you might be
Yeah,
angling towards that one.
yeah, yeah.
The other thing is that one, so it hits a few levels of it is it's scalable in that I really want to do well, it's a funny man. I want to do a scaled version
Hmm.
because I think it really changes the feel of the knife, and I think it works equally well with scales
Hmm.
as it does as a skeletonized knife.
Hmm.
I think it fits in your line because of the design language, and it's like a little bit unique. It's like there's classic there,
Hmm.
but it also has like the kind of like a modern, like a little more modern feel to it.
Hmm.
And I designed another blade shape that gives us like more flexibility as far as like you are pretty situated inside of like the outdoor space.
Hmm.
I think I hit two different groups in the outdoor space with this, with like, not to sound like corny, but like with urban like design language.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Okay.
and that's kind of what I'm going after in my brand, as maybe it can be seen from the outside, is like classic use cases with less than classic design, like more modern design. And
Mm-hmm.
so that definitely sounds good. But
So sticking point for me, the only thing is like in my head, I'm like, oh, I wanted to make that
I
knife.
know I was gonna say I knew you wanted to, so I wasn't gonna
I
directly
do want to
ask
make
for
it.
it.
But here's the thing. Maybe the things don't necessarily need to overlap. I know I want to make some. I know I will not make as many probably as you would make. That's a reasonable assumption.
I'd like to think so. I'd hope to make a bunch of them. I
Let's
can
just say
say,
that Luke is never going to make as many as TJ's making. I think it's like a safe assumption.
well, but you'd make cool ones. That's the
So
difference.
and maybe that's the thing. Like maybe there's a way to do both. Like maybe I can make some cool stuff and we could do a also cool production version.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, we can
So
definitely talk about that.
yeah, no, it's because of my free time, not free time, but because of the way my time balance is changing with my employee.
Yep.
Like this project between you and I is very close to the top right
Okay.
now, and so it's like
So we have
I
to make
was
a
kind
fairly
of
quick
trying to
decision.
move my mind around this like Tonto idea, and then I decided to make this thing work the way I hope it actually does and go smooth. I think we should reroute, but it's like it's coming up. I even
So,
have. I would go as far as to say I even have steel for this knife if we actually wanted to do it.
oh, look at
Um,
that, dude. I mean, that's like,
because that I did buy a bunch of steel at the beginning of the year, and it's all thinner stuff. It wouldn't work for that for the bigger knife, but it would definitely work for that.
and there's another cool component to this, which is I actually did 3D work and I have a model and I'm really proud of it. So, and like
Yeah,
you helped me so
yeah,
much getting to the point where I could design a knife fully modeled. And this is
right,
the first knife that I've fully modeled.
right,
So, me being the emotional creature that I am, like, there's the story that probably
right.
actually makes like putting this design with your company like a very good fit.
Yeah, yeah,
Ooh,
and
dang.
I will say, like from a macro standpoint, like I'm sort of searching for a little bit of a replacement for the scalpel. Not a. The scalpel could come back, but there's some things with the scalpel that are troubling to me in terms of scaling that knife up. And having the skeletonization, oddly enough, is a big part of that. The Scalpel Plus doesn't have any through holes, and it's really pretty hard to do any kind of high density fixturing without like some kind of through hole to hold it down.
Yep.
And so I was like, I can either redesign that with through holes of some kind. So that's where I'm kind of like aiming this all is to fit in that slot, and people just love the Scalpel Plus, and so kind of entering that little corner of the market. That's kind of what I'm hoping for.
All right, here I'm going to go through my thought process on this.
Okay.
Okay. We already know that like the project is a good fit from the story standpoint. I'm emotionally attached to being able to make it because I'm also proud of it. But The reality is that I ultimately just want to get something running. And what would serve my process best is to design to on the heels of designing a knife completely in CAD is to design another one,
Mm-hmm.
not necessarily to start making the first one. If
Mm.
the end goal is me being able to be more functional with 3D modeling.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So you have a product that has a home that is a good fit that satisfies an immediate need. And the emotional response is like, no, I want to do it myself. And so like the reality is like, I think probably like I will say that I will commit that if you want to do that model, we can do that model.
I would be interested for sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's a better,
Yeah.
I think it actually
Yeah.
satisfies a few things. However, there is one design element that I really want to keep.
Yeah. We had a little debate.
We did.
I was
when
hoping,
I first did it.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can do it.
I know.
So
we can do that.
Can we try?
We can keep it. No, I know we can do it.
We can do it. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have some ideas on how we can do it too.
Yeah.
I actually think I think it is a very, very good fit.
Mm-hmm. When you designed that, I looked at it and I thought about it and I was like, I wish I could make that knife.
Can I give you a little bit of context story?
Yeah.
Or a little bit of backstory here too, which is fun. When I designed that knife, a company reached out and was really interested in it because I was having a conversation with the company. I won't mention the company. And so I was basically like, okay, cool. Like I'm going to finish this design. And they were like, hey, we love this design. We want to make it. And I'm like, cool. It went to their sales team. And the sales team was like, we like this design, but we think that maybe it would be better if you did this to it. And I did one round. I was like, okay. I was like, I'm really happy with where the design is. Like, I really like this design. And I was like, I will, as an exercise, I will make another blade shape. And I made one more blade shape. But I had submitted a few sketches. They came back to me again and they were like, we don't love this blade shape. Here's the beauty of security and freedom. And like also just like being true to yourself. I was like, you know what? I can appreciate that. I think you should find a design that fits what you were looking for. Because I'm actually so happy with this design that I'm not willing to modify it. Yeah. And in that not willing to modify it, we can't move forward with the project. I have an excellent relationship with the company. That's like totally fine. But it felt really good realize.
It's good to be on a design by design basis.
It's good to be on a design by design basis, but also to realize that like I was okay with not getting that project. And as like, solo entity business person, turning down money in projects is like not always the easiest thing to do.
Yeah.
But look at what just happened, which is it opened a door.
Because
you and I did not talk about this. I did not tell you that project was canceled. You didn't know it was canceled.
You didn't want to break my heart.
Yeah. There was nothing. So that's actually really, really cool. Cool.
That's going to be a fun little knife.
I think so.
I think so. Yeah. And to circle real quick to what we were debating, I have 3/16 holes for lanyard holes on the models that I've done so far. And the way my fixtures are set up is like a beautiful part of the process of how they're being held. And this does not have a 3/16 or a round hole to speak of.
Right. Or a geometric hole.
Yeah. Anything that is, the holes are organically shaped, let's say. And so that'll take, I can absolutely see methods for doing it. It adds some complication, but it's not like deal breaker. This is a huge problem.
It's also cool. And again, I think it fits both your brand and my aesthetic. And also it feels kind of cool to be doing like designy stuff where like, it's hard.
Pushing my boundaries.
Do it. Pushing boundaries. It's so designery.
Can I tell you my possible solution to that real quick?
Let's hear it.
So obviously I have to locate it on those holes somehow, right? So my thought is, if we have the thing is, if I make an aluminum fixture, which all my piercings are,
Yep.
the aluminum is going to wear. Like if I make enough of them, it's going to get slopped just from the
Sure.
aluminum. So if I machine those holes in op one and I move it to the second operation for location, if I have in like the rear hole, if there is like 3/16 pins that are precision located so that the 3 pins create like a triangular location.
Got it.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
So it's like still an aluminum boss, but the aluminum isn't doing the locating. It's 3 points
It's
of
a
contact
hardened-
from the pins.
Yeah.
So you have a hardened surface that's also replaceable.
Yep.
And I would just trust that. And so after thinking about that, that's
You're like,
pretty
okay.
much ends up at the same result with just a
that
little
was
bit
that
more
was kind of where
engineering.
I thought two of the solutions, which would be an actual hardened insert or a replaceable insert.
Yeah.
Okay. And with the beauty of that is you could have like one or two actually like 2 locating points or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the third version was the expandable collet.
Yeah. Yep.
Machined to the correct shape.
Yep.
And I think that for me, that's the most interesting, because you're like, you get retention as well as like a perfect fit. So I think we should explore that a little bit too.
Yeah. Once we like fully ink this deal and I'm looking at it in CAD, I think we can go back and forth on work holding and stuff and get a game. But looking at it, I mean, like there's no like the Scalpel Plus was harder to hold than that thing because it doesn't have any holes at all. So it's going to be easier than that. Because the problem with the Scalpel Plus is it's chamfered all the way around and there's no through holes.
Yep.
So to hold it for op 2, I have like, I don't know, 20 thou worth of room to grip on it.
Yep.
And it's just you need like quite a bit of force if you're only on that small of a surface. So like if you're using little mighty bites or something, you're going to indent into it to try to grip that little of a surface. So I had to put it in like a whole vise. And then if you're using a vise, you just don't have the volume space available to do like multiples. So this knife, you know, it can be held next to either a different operation or another knife.
Right.
So it'll be.
There's like another small bonus here, which is like on my side primarily, but we haven't talked about like, oh, can I make some knives of my own? Right. Like this is something that we do in contracts when we're designing for other companies. So I'm assuming we will figure out some method of me making
verbiage.
Also. Verbiage. But because your process is so good, like I'm trying to figure out how to make this. So I'm also going to be learning like how to make this in an efficient way.
Right.
And ideal scenario is that like my argument with designers producing their own designs ahead of time is we build view, like we're like putting eyes on the product. Right.
Yeah.
So if I can kind of simultaneously be getting my custom ready to run and doing some, content around that and like some higher end builds, that puts eyes towards our production project.
Right.
Which is like, I mean, these are the things that you and I talk about all the time, which is like these are the assets that we think matter, but with production knives, it's actually really hard to tell because their scale and their price point is so different than what we're doing. So I would be very curious to see if like at our scale, if that rule and methodology holds.
Yeah.
I think that's kind
there's
of
some experimentation here
too.
Yeah.
But sweet. Dude, I'm actually super excited. That is what a nice turn of events.
No, it is. No, yeah, I knew that you would probably be excited to do a little pivot, but it does. I know you put work into it, so I was bummed, but I think
all good.
I think we got a new direction.
All good. Just goes back in the vault.
Yep. Back in the vault to see emerge unscathed.
Let me know when you get that bigger
fight.
machine.
Yep.
I love it. Dude, I feel like we're done.
Yeah.
We done?
That's a wrap.
That is a wrap. Guys, thank you for listening. Hope you enjoyed the pod. We're still trying to get eyes on this thing. If you can share it with a homie, if you can leave us a review, if you send us questions, we would love it. TJ, does anyone ever send us questions? You're seeing the email.
Not really via email because we never mention it on here, but I've some traffic over there on the Instagram page, which is probably the best route. So if you want to follow us on Instagram and respond on each episode has a post, so that like eventually I would hope that, we can get sort of communities talking to each other in these comment sections. It'd be cool.
Yep.
Cool.
we built a Discord, but we haven't used it yet.
Yeah.
Which I think we should. I think we should throw it out and use it. So maybe we both make sure we actually are good with it and then do that.
Yeah.
And then only other thing is after last week's episode and like talking about monetization, I got some really nice feedback from people, and I had like a few people like reached out and was like, hey, like here, like I've done this, I can help. So I was really cool.
Cool.
I'll fill you in on that a little bit. All right. I'm rambling. Guys, thanks. Have a great day.
Peace.
Peace.